Welcome back to He's a Giant, a pod about all things football, all things Giants football, all things college football, all things draft football. We apologize for being late. That's on me. I dare you guys to try to stay awake when your kids are trying to fall asleep, and there's Benadryl everywhere. So anyway, so my apologies, everybody. Welcome back to our first episode after the draft. It's a whole new world for us. So I'm your host Sal. I'm here with my co-host Monte. What's going on, man?
What's going on, man? Yeah, we got our first draft cycle out of the way. That's pretty exciting. I just want to start out, and we're gonna have a lot of people. More people are gonna join, I'm sure. But thank you to all our fans who supported us throughout the entire draft process. It was really fun, and we appreciate you guys always supporting us and retweeting us and all that type of stuff. So again, really appreciate it. And me and Sal are already excited and talking about, how we can get better for the next process. So can't thank you guys enough.
Yeah. And apologies for everybody who, we know this worked out poorly in terms of timing. The Knicks game is on against the Sixers. And trust me, I'm a lifelong Knicks fan, so I get it. So those who are here, we really appreciate it. Oh, Peter's here. Thank you, Peter. Don't mess with Peter. Don't mess with his Knicks, Monty. Don't mess with Peter's Knicks. I'm gonna send out a quick quote to everybody that we are live.
And shout out John May for already having the comment of the night. This must be how TJ Tampa felt when we
that
made me crack up.
Yeah, we want to recreate the feeling that a lot of kids have on draft night, just sitting there waiting for the call. Anyway, so thank you guys for coming. So today we're going to go through a recap, obviously, of the Giants draft this past weekend, and we're just going to go over the players they took, some of the philosophical issues, but I think we kind of want to get into some of the Giants' overall discussion points. Fun week in Giants Twitter. A lot of
maybe not so much for anybody who's reading our tweets this week. A lot of people were in their feels about what we were saying.
It was an emotional week. There were a lot of laughs, a lot of tears, a lot of rage, a lot of joy. So it was a fun week in Giants Twitter, and it all emanated. Actually, I'm gonna blame Dan Duggan for this because he started it.
Be fair, I'm the one who clipped it and then set a fire on Twitter.
Yeah, and Duggan gave you credit because you clipped like 3 minutes of it. He was like, like, he didn't just clip like a 10-second gotcha moment. So
I try to get the whole thing out there. Use my Twitter premium and really, get those extra minutes in there.
Exactly. So Duggan said on his Monday morning, for those who don't know, Dan Duggan does sort of a live chat with Charlotte Carroll of The Athletic on typically Mondays during the season. And he did one during this past Monday to go over the draft strategy. And he commented on something that Joe Schoen himself had said, which is, something he's been saying the last couple of weeks, which is, you got to be patient. We're not one or two players away. Preach patience, right? And I think Duggan kind of, rightfully so, when he kind of took offense, I wouldn't say offense, he took exception with Joe Schoen demanding that in his third offseason, something that I think a position you and I have both held. That, I mean, you can say what you want about Joe Schoen, his process, the direction, his individual choices, all is fair, good or bad. But for, it is his third offseason that he's coming through, and for him to preach patience is a whopper, in my opinion. So, you clip Duggan's thoughts. What are your overall thoughts on that, Monty? I mean, I know a lot of people took exception to it, but what are your actual views on this so you can clarify?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think a lot of people are surprised about, we're like, what changed? And I think we made it pretty clear that we felt that, and I think you're already starting to see it, that if the Giants went and got quarterback, and we'll get into that, look, if they didn't like one, they didn't force it. We're not saying that they should have forced it, but the reality is, if they found a quarterback, that would have, in some sense, like reset a timeline for them. When you get a rookie, and this is what Duggan was saying, if you get a rookie quarterback, it makes sense to ask for patience. Like, look, we got to get this guy ready. But without that, you're putting out onto the field this year, likely, I mean, unless they put out Drew Lock, a quarterback that they just paid $40 million a year. They've made moves, and it's all stuff, Duggan talked about, made moves like trading for Brian Burns. They didn't trade down in this draft at all. They, we'll talk about that. They added to this offensive line among other things. Like, these are not necessarily actions of a team that should be asking for patience. That they're not acting how they're necessarily preaching it here. I understand that there's ideas here of them, like, really, you can see that their probably ultimate plan is move on from Daniel Jones, and there's ideas there that it's like, look, give us time, we're gonna get this thing right. But the reality of it is we're in year 3. You made massive, like, moves to speed up the process last year, and they blew up in your face, and they're realizing that, credit to them for realizing it. But if you're not making big pivot moves to, like drafting a quarterback, it's hard to sit there and say, like, give us patience here. You have to give something for the Giants fans to be patient about. And right now there isn't anything. There really isn't. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Before I get into it, thank you everybody again for being here. And if you guys don't mind, I just have to remind everybody, I hate to do this, but hit the like button. And if you get a chance, please retweet the link to the pod, just to try to remind people we're here. I think people are a little bit tuned out from Giant stuff. So we appreciate that. Now, here's my thoughts on this. And I think people who follow me on Twitter and who listen to me on Spaces and hear me here kind of know my view on this. I think that Joe Shane has done some things well. I think he's done some things not well. I definitely don't agree with this idea that Joe Shane is somehow beyond reproach, which seems to be the tenor of the argument against what you just said. Like, when you can criticize him, and people take real offense to criticizing this man, which I don't quite understand. He's a general manager like everybody else. And when you're a first-year general manager, any first-year general manager, especially Joe Shane, I would say, coming into the situation he did, but basically all new GMs come into bad situations. If they were good situations, they probably wouldn't be there, right? But you give them a lot of grace. You say, look, the last guy screwed up something. You've got to claw out of it. Now, Dave Gettleman was a historically bad GM, like, in my opinion, the worst GM in the history of New York sports, at least as far as my lifetime, and I'm older. So Joe Shane inherited a pretty bad situation. So I'll always give him grace. That first year, I was definitely like, hey, just give this man room to work. Fine. He did what he had to get through that first year. And they did a good job. Like, they took the roster they had, they made the playoffs, right? Everybody was thrilled.
Mm-hmm.
The real test was not what he did that first year. It was what he did in the second offseason. That's where he had to make some big boy decisions. And he made his choices. He made his decisions to pay Daniel Jones. Obviously, that's a big one. To base the decision to pay Daniel Jones, at least in part, tied to Saquon Barkley's fate. Tying a quarterback and a running back together was a very strange thing to do. He decided to, in his own words, expedite the rebuild. Right? Were those his exact words? And make moves that were more of a win now kind of thing to do. So he reset the timeline himself. He chose to, admittedly so. Whether you agree with it in real time or not, understand why he did it or not, he did reset the timeline. And that was a choice he made. This notion that he didn't have a choice is not fair. I think he had a choice. He's a GM. He made a certain choice or set of choices. He reset the timeline. He operated differently, and he set in motion a series of decisions, like a domino effect last offseason, that were based around the original, like I call it, the original sin of paying Daniel Jones. He wanted to justify his investment in Jones, and so he made a lot of win now moves. Let's think about it. He walked into last draft class with 10 draft picks, 10, including 4 in the top 100. He took pick number 100, traded it for a 31-year-old tight end who most of us applauded him for, including myself, right? A legitimately top 5 NFL tight end, but he was 31 and he was coming off a couple of years where he didn't finish the season because of injury. But he needed a target for Daniel Jones to prove that he can run an offense at a higher level. So and this was, by the way, in a very tight end strong draft class. Last year's class had outstanding tight ends in it, and
one of the best in history.
Right. And he said, no, I'm not going to get one of those younger players to develop. I'm actually going to get the veteran. Okay. He he took a center in the second round. Now he was a good player. Now don't get me wrong, and you and I talk about this, right? I always like
Mhm.
John Michael Schmitz. He's a very good player, but how many rebuilding teams are taking a center with the second round pick, right? In the rebuild, probably not. It's sort of one of those things where like he may be one of the best players on the board, but are you really committing that asset to a center there? If your mentality is I got to rebuild this roster beginning to end, right? It's debatable, and
Yeah,
we'll
we
get into a little
disagree on
bit.
that one, but
I know, and I don't hate the pick. You know, I like John Michael Schmitz a lot. And you know, I have a similar view of a guy we're going to talk about tonight. Like,
mhm.
it's
Yeah,
worth
we'll get
talking
into
about.
it.
It's at least worth talking about positional value, right? Like, if you're
Yeah.
truly rebuilding, do you make that play? He took his fourth round pick last year and traded it to go up, what was it, 17 spots in the third round to get another target for Daniel Jones and Jalen Hyde. He didn't sit there and say, look, I'm rebuilding. I need these picks. I'm going to let the board come to me and I'm going to take BPA, which is what, I think most GMs would do. They're certainly not giving up the fourth round pick to move up a little in the third round. That's not typically what rebuilding GMs do. And of course, you give up two picks to move up one spot to get Deontay Banks, in the first round. And again,
Mhm.
you got a great player, but you got Joey Porter Jr. sitting on the board. If you're in rebuilding mode, are you doing that, right? With both those players on the board, are you just giving away two picks to move up one spot to get your guy? These are all I got to get my guy moves, and I got to get my guy is a mentality that teams that are not rebuilding generally have. Isn't that fair to say?
Yeah. I
So
would one thing I would say though, like when you go into a draft where you just spent, 11 picks and you drafted 11 players the year before, if you then turn around and draft 10 more players, you're just asking for those players to get cut. So, the one thing I would say to that is draft picks are capital. They are a currency to move around the draft. They did it a lot that year. It wasn't just one time. It wasn't just Banks. They also did it with Hyatt. So I understand some criticism there. But at the same time, I very much felt strongly that I couldn't pick 10 players last year because that's how you're just asking for these players you just took the previous year not to be on the roster the next year.
I was just invaded by an intruder. I had to. I thought she was out, so I had to get rid of her. Anyway, so apologies. So in any case, no, I agree with you. And so look, we can argue about the merits of these individual moves, right? But the mentality was clearly driven by a guy to win now. Again, he reset the clock. He chose to reset the clock. He reset the timeline on everything, and that was his choice. It all blew up in his face. Historically bad blow up in his face this
Mhm.
past year. Nobody
Immediately.
wanted to see immediately, like within one drive, right? It all went to
Really
shit.
is true.
Um, at the end of the day, like let's take a look back at this season really quickly before we get into this. It blew up in his face. We were down 60-0 at halftime in Arizona for the season.
Mhm.
60-0. The team was in shambles. They had that amazing comeback against Arizona in the second half where Daniel Jones he had that one game, where he played amazing. But 60-0 going into that half. And then they were 2-6 at the deadline. Daniel Jones is hurt. Saquon Barkley's playing with some sort of ankle injury. You know, the team looks dead, completely dead at that point. You're at the trade deadline. You've got expiring deals in Barkley and McKinney. What do? You don't trade them, right? You sit on them. In
Mhm.
fact, you announce to teams, "Don't call us. We're good," especially with Barkley.
Mhm.
And then you go on. The rest is history, right? And then they both leave. Joe Shane has made a lot of decisions himself that put him in the exact position he's in. And I'm not saying I want to fire Joe Shane at all. I don't really believe firing people is the solution. I think that you have to kind of have people learn from their mistakes and get better, really. However, I'm not going to sit here and be like, Joe Shane's process is great because I hear that a lot. People say it as if it's like a dogma that's accepted. Why? Why are you accepting that as dogma? Is his process great? Are the things I'm describing good process? He's made mistakes and bad mistakes, and you're allowed to, but you're not allowed to hide behind them and say, "Oh, well, the mistakes are made. That's why I can't be judged." Right?
Mhm.
So that's the bottom line. He made the mistakes that led us to this point. He's made process mistakes. He's made individual choice mistakes. He's made horrible miscalculations. And you can't just say, well, if it wasn't for the Jones deal, but the Jones deal was $160 million, and you based every other decision for the organization on that choice.
Yeah,
You
a
can't
lot of
hide
win now moves because of that decision.
you can't hide behind that now, right? You can't you put up the meme, right? That Dan Duggan described of the guy shooting somebody and then saying, what was it again? You can
It
describe
was
it.
Joe Shane quarterback situation. It's like, well, the quarterback situation's holding this team back.
Right. And Joe Shane is the guy who shot the quarterback situation, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it is what it is. I think the way I look at it is Joe Shane should be happy he still has a job. And he should be thankful that he has the opportunity to maybe get another crack at this, to rebuild this thing. But it is year 3. At the end of the day, you've used 24 draft picks, not including the picks you've traded away to get to those 24. 24 draft picks, and have had 2 massive spending sprees in free agency dollars. Massive spending sprees. The Giants ranked 2nd in overall team spending in 2023's offseason and ranked 5th so far in 2025. So big spending, lots of draft capital. Of the 24 draft picks, we've had 4 first-round picks, 3 in the top 10, of course, including this year, a bunch in the top 100. At the end of the day, you've had plenty of opportunity to rebuild this roster. You can't say results don't matter at this point. Results are going to matter. You got to put together a product of, you got to win. You have to find a way to win with this team. That's the bottom line. Nobody, people, and the folks who are kind of upset at you and me for bringing up this argument on the timeline are saying we're upset mainly because we didn't get the quarterback we wanted. And I really am going to push back on that. There's no mystery. You and I wanted a quarterback. We were banging the drum that we had a day 1 quarterback problem for a long time. And you and I specifically individually felt that that the quarterbacks in this class were worth taking. Specifically McCarthy and Penix, I thought were guys worth walking away with in round 1. However you wanted to pull the trigger and take them. And that was just our personal decision. He had a different decision, right? He didn't value them, meaning Joe Shane. He didn't value them, and that's that. He made a choice not to take them. That's okay. He chose not to take them. That's not why I'm upset about Joe Shane saying, don't judge me. I'm upset because it's still his choice, right? He's still making choices. You have made many choices. You have to be judged by your results. Process doesn't mean a damn thing. Process multiplied by years still has to equal results. Even if you accept that he has good process, which I'm not conceding. I'm not so sure his process is great. I think the fact that he's not Dave Gettleman has people really kind of confused here. Being not Gettleman does not make you good.
Mm-hmm.
It really doesn't.
Yeah. Let me jump into this a little bit. So, I agree with you. I think there's been ideas of Joe Shane where he has used good process, but there's also been examples of him not using good process. And I think to what you said, I don't think it's fair to use Dave Gettleman as a bar. And I think that's where it's gotten with many people in this organization, that because Joe Shane is miles ahead of Dave Gettleman, who showed zero process and showed, actively worked against good process, was doing the opposite of what people said to do for good process. And now we have somebody who has shown signs of being a modern GM. And I'm not saying that we're not going to end up seeing that Joe Shane has not turned the corner here and is not going to suddenly be like a really good GM that shows only good process, but he's shown us recent doubts, and I don't think he's like miles ahead of the other 31 GMs in the league with how he thinks and his process. I think we're moving to an NFL where there's a lot of forward-thinking GMs throughout this league, and quite honestly, a lot of people sitting out there begging for a GM job who also are forward-thinking. It is a very, very difficult thing to break into, to be an NFL GM. Again, I'm not saying to like Joe Shane go. If anything, I think Joe Shane will probably get a chance at another head coach, for being honest, just based off how he acted this offseason, which I'll say is a good thing. I thought there was quarterbacks worth taking, but I felt confident Joe Shane, if he liked one, he would take one. And if he wasn't taking one, it was because he didn't like one. I didn't think he was going to force this decision either way. If he took JJ McCarthy, I thought it was going to be for the right reason. If he took Michael Penix, I thought it was going to be for the right reasons. Just like passing on him, I think it's for the right reasons. I think it's from where he came from. But it doesn't mean that I don't think that it's that this doesn't set the team back by not taking a quarterback here. That whether that was something that was totally in his control or not, and I know he tried to trade up for Drake May, I do ultimately think more than anything, this affects Brian Daboll because we are now going into year 3. We brought in Brian Daboll to develop a quarterback. That was what we did. That's why we brought him in. We only developed Daniel Jones, and he's not looking like such a good investment right now. We have not taken a single quarterback any of the 3 drafts we've gone. And look, this is the reality where we are. We're preaching for patience. We need to compete this year because if we don't compete and this team struggles, that will be Brian Daboll's team back-to-back years having losing seasons. And then at that point is where I will push back. As much as I do like Brian Daboll, I am high on Brian Daboll, but I do not want a coach coming off back-to-back losing seasons who I imagine, knowing this ownership, will be on the hot seat to be picking his quarterback that year. That's where I have trouble, and that's why I think it was a very bad thing that the Giants didn't come away with a quarterback they liked. So that's the world we're in now, guys. Like, look, we got a great player, and we're gonna go into all these players that we talked about. But just because to me, the alternative is not forcing a quarterback you don't like. The alternative is that they liked one of these guys. And if they liked one of these guys, that's a best case scenario. If they got Drake May or they like JJ McCarthy and they just took him. The alternative of not liking any of these and hoping that you'll like one next year is not a good place. That is not an optimistic place for fans to be where I can see this thing working out well for us. So maybe it will, but there's a very murky future, and that's what I'm pushing back on. And although I don't think Joe Schoen has been a bad GM, I think he's made mistakes, and I think these mistakes are going to continue to be magnified until he finds a way to pivot off the mistakes that he's made, and he hasn't done that yet.
Yeah. And again, we're not saying can Joe Schoen. That's the furthest thing from the truth. But everything you said is fair. And he's got to produce. Like I don't see the problem with just saying, "Hey man, you've made these choices. They are your choices. Go produce now. Put out something that looks like a winner." And what does that specifically look like, right? At the very minimum, the guys you brought in, your draft picks the last couple of years, they need to start hitting. They need to start looking like contributors. They need to start being part of a winning culture around here. It would be nice if the quarterback you paid could actually play football well. That would be a plus. And just in general, your team has to start looking like it's trending in the right direction. So that's what we mean, right? This can't be like a limitless time capsule of like, well, there are no repercussions, Joe Schoen. Just keep building at your own pace. Don't worry about your competition because you're in a competitive environment. This is not a zero-sum game here. Other teams are getting better, including the division, and I think we need to start talking about that too. That's kind of our take. I think both of us have the same take on this for the most part. We have minor disagreements on how we got there, but ultimately we feel like nobody is beyond reproach. Joe Schoen is absolutely fair game for criticism, and he shouldn't be hiding behind, be patient now, right? That's different than saying fire him. We don't want to fire him. I certainly don't want to do that. But don't hide behind, don't like, oh, well, you got to be patient. We're not 1 or 2 players away. Because if you're going to tell me you're not 1 or 2 players away, then I'm going to ask you, why did you operate in this particular draft like you're 1 or 2 players away? And I think that's worth discussion too.
Yeah, and we'll get into that. Yeah, the one last thing I want to say, and then we'll move on and get into this, is that, look, people are saying that, this is year 1, year 2 because of the mistake they made last year. To me, I ask, do you think that Joe Schoen should get more time? Because then if he, or better way to phrase this, do you think Joe Schoen, if he didn't make the mistake on Daniel Jones, deserves less time than him making the mistake? So he gets less time for not making the mistake. Is that the argument we're making? That's where I just don't see eye to eye with a lot of this. But yeah, let's just go ahead
Yeah,
and get into this draft.
we'll have and you know what? I'll say this before we go on. This discussion, if the Giants start poorly this year again, Vegas has them pegged for 6.5 wins, right? Over
Mhm.
under. If they have another weak season and it starts poorly, you think we're going to be the ones having this conversation? We're going to be the ones who have already had the conversation. This conversation is going to pick up steam, and he just has to be ready for it. People are going to start questioning it. The national media, the local media, they're going to be on his head about this particular issue. So he just has to make sure that he has his team in place and that his coaches can do something with it and look like they can put a winner on the field. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about this offseason. We'll get some people on with some other views and things like that. But that's just kind of our initial take and kind of pushing back on the you're just mad that you didn't take your quarterback kind of take, and trying to trying to give you an idea why we feel this way.
Absolutely. All right, let's get into it. So the Giants had their first draft in the he's a Giant era. So it's a big moment for us. We did a lot of work. We appreciate you guys being part of it to get to that point. They had 6 picks going in. They came out with 6 players. Absolutely zero movement. Not up, not down, nowhere. We all know. We don't need to rehash the whole quarterback thing. It's well documented. The Giants tried supposedly to get up to the 3rd pick. Reportedly offered a fairly good offer to New England. New England was not interested. That was that. Could they have given more? Could they have not? I don't know. It doesn't matter. Deal didn't happen. Giants stayed at pick 6 with J.J. McCarthy on the board. Michael Penix Jr. on the board. Decided to pass on the quarterback. Took wide receiver Malik Nabers from LSU, who was, I think, pretty clearly BPA by most metrics at the time the Giants took him. So we'll go through this. The first pick was Malik Nabers. By now, everybody should know who Malik Nabers is. He was our wide receiver 2 in our very first episode, Monty.
Yep.
Our very first He's a Giant episode was a wide receiver review back when we thought Daniel Jones would still be here without a doubt. No problem. Yep. We're building for him, and we're like,
he is, though.
He's still here. That's true. It's viewed differently, though, right?
Yeah.
We thought we would be building on something coming off like hopefully a good 2023 year, and we would need a wide receiver 1, which we did. We kind of knew that, and we reviewed Nabers and said this is wide receiver 2, and I remember saying I can 100% something along the lines of I can 100% see the Giants take Malik Nabers in April to be our wide receiver, and lo and behold, here we are. I jinxed everybody for those who wanted a quarterback. So we went back and listened to our review. If for those who are interested, go back. It was episode 1 of He's a Giant. Listen to our review to hear our Malik Nabers breakdown from summer scouting. I have to say, man, I'm gonna
similar right now.
It's gonna sound like we said we should pat each other on the back because I think we nailed it with the assessment of this player. Malik Nabers, everybody should know by now, arguably the best wide receiver in number 1, but very close 1A, 1B kind of situation with this guy. In my opinion, Malik Nabers should have won the Biletnikoff Award this year. He was the best wide receiver in college football. He was by far the most productive receiver in college football. He had the most yards per route run in college football. He was up there in almost every advanced metric. While on that powerhouse LSU team, sharing targets with Brian Thomas, another first-round pick. But this guy's an absolute alpha, number 1 wide receiver. We said multiple times over the course of the season, going into the draft, that we thought that Malik Nabers would easily be wide receiver 1 in almost any other draft class going back like 10 years.
Yeah.
So, we get this guy. The Giants got an amazing player here. So give me your thoughts on the Nabers pick.
Look, I mean, if you weren't going to go quarterback, we said it, like, we were even nervous about the idea of trading down because we felt that you had special blue chip players at positions of need and positions of value. And you have Malik Nabers, and you see how much wide receivers are making right now. You just saw Monra get paid $30 million a year, and you just wait until Justin Jefferson gets paid. You were going to get a cost-controlled stud in Malik Nabers. Malik Nabers, we talked about it going into last year. He was a guy who's kind of had a slow start in 2022, but down the stretch in 2022, he looked like, one of the best wide receivers in college football. And we said, if you can carry that over into 2023, you are looking at like one of the best wide receiver prospects we've seen over the last 5-10 years. You know, you can remove a Jamar Chase, but even then I would say he got to the point where he is right there with a guy like Jamar Chase. I would still put Jamar Chase over Malik Nabers, but he is right there with them. He is very close. Ridiculous athlete. Looking at some of these numbers here, the guy ran a 4.38. He jumped 42 inches, like explosive and quick athlete. And, when you watch this guy play, he just maintains speed and gets faster as he runs the route. And, it's something we talked about in our initial review. I remember I said, I called him a sports car, because as he goes through his routes and he makes a break, it's like he's shifting gears, and he gets up to that next gear, and he just continues to get faster and faster. He goes through it, and the stamina is there. It's like much like, kind of like we talked about Jaden Daniels. It's just like he keeps the speed throughout the entire play. There's no loss of speed ever with him, and he is one of the most explosive wide receivers I've ever watched at the college level. Incredible after the catch. Very, very good route runner. A guy who, we said last year had a lot of room to grow. He grew, but I still think he has a lot of room to grow. This guy is not. I think Marvin Harrison was a better route runner. I think Rome Odunze was a better route runner, and I think he can be just as good as those guys. And he's getting there. He's not far behind. So, what do you think about Malik Nabers?
Well, let's start by saying I see John just put it. I was just going to say he's 20. He won't be 21 until July 28th. So, like, almost right before the season, he doesn't turn 21. So this guy is one of the youngest prospects in the whole class at any position. Yet he's already one of the most productive. His rise was meteoric from the end of the 2022 season, which is when we picked up on him, through the 23 season. There's not much to add to what you said. This guy is he's the total package as a wide receiver in so many ways, yet he's still not a complete route runner. And he's still not there as a route runner. Like, he's still getting better, and he has room for adjustment. But, and something you guys hopefully will see as we do when we do this again next year, when we go through our prospect reviews, we've learned so much this year going through this process the first time, especially sitting down with Matt Waldman and analyzing the things we should be looking at, especially for the offensive positions. When you break it down, like things like the release package that Nabers offers, right? Like he has varied release packages at the snap. He offers false steps, stop and goes. He sinks his hip quickly. He just gets immediate separation at the snap, and he just takes off, and he quickly separates, accelerates. And something we mentioned even in the summer scouting episode that you see him do now is, and you mentioned this, the sports car speed transition. He does that as he catches the ball. Like, he looks like he accelerates into the catch, which is insane. Like, he's getting fast. Other guys slow down to catch the ball. He speeds up, takes the ball, and just keeps going. He is a special player. I have nothing else to say about the guy. He's an awesome, awesome player. I think with good quarterback play, and I don't even mean great. I mean just good, top 15 of the NFL quarterback play. This guy should be a perennial 1,400-yard receiver, 10-plus touchdown, top 5, top 10 NFL receiver, period. That's what his upside is in terms of production with good quarterback play. If you got great quarterback play, I think you're talking about a guy who could have even a bigger career than that. He's an outstanding prospect. So the Giants got a dog here, and hopefully they use him properly. Hopefully the quarterback play doesn't hinder him. I have concerns about that, certainly. Because ultimately his game in terms of production right now is a lot of quick stuff where he gets yak underneath in the short area and intermediate area, and a lot of slot fades and go balls, which are largely timing routes. If your quarterback timing is off, it's going to be hard to maximize his potential on these things. If those throws into that short intermediate area, like on a slant or a crosser, if he's got to slow down to catch the ball and stop his momentum in the NFL, that's going to be a tackle right as soon as he catches it. You're not going to get a chance to showcase that ability of his to take off like a thoroughbred. So, one of the things Daniel Jones does very poorly is hit guys in stride, and keep their momentum going forward, which is why yak under Daniel Jones is often not very good. People say he's accurate. He's not accurate in the sense that he keeps his receivers in motion. They have to usually slow down or stop to catch the ball. That kills Yak, right? So
Yeah.
we'll see who the quarterback is and how they play. But these are the kind of things that when you have your guy, you can see Neighbors take off. I think this year, Monty, like Vegas projecting him at 850 yards is pretty much on the money. Um,
Mhm.
I'm going to actually take the under on that, unfortunately, and I hope I'm wrong. I know you're going to be different than me, but
Yeah.
you know, no wide receiver in the Daniel Jones era has crossed 800 yards. Forget 850, forget 1,000. Nobody's gotten 800. And it's, I think, in large part for the reasons I said. Obviously, the talent is different in terms of level versus Malik Nabers, so that's part of it. But I think I'm going to take a little bit under 850 on him. What do you think?
Yeah, man. I'm going to take the over on that. I think, this is by far the most talented player that, and a guy on the up, unlike a guy like Kenny Galladay and Darren Waller, who I'm sure having Daniel Jones certainly did not help their career, but also were on the downswing of their career. Malik Nabers is on the upswing of his career, and I think something we said before. I definitely understand your concerns where he won't maximize what he does well, but it's so much easier to get the ball and use a guy like Malik Nabers when you don't have the best quarterback than like a guy like Roma Dunze, a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr., whoever. I think Malik Nabers is somewhat situation proof. I think he's a guy who you can scheme open and scheme and manufacture yards out of him, and he's going to find ways to get it. I think you look at a guy like Garrett Wilson, who was somewhat of a similar player in Malik Nabers. I think Malik Nabers is a much better player in Garrett Wilson, and you can see what he's done with his terrible quarterback situations, going back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. I think you're going to see a season that resembles that with Malik Nabers. I think you're going to see a guy who is supposed to be a much better receiver than he is, but ultimately I think he is going to be a guy who does find success. I wanted to with that, just throw out, before we move on, I want to throw out some of these stats here, just so, especially for our listeners, try to, display how impressive Malik Nabers was this year. I mean, just off the raw stats, 89 receptions, 1,568 yards and 14 touchdowns this year. Just crazy numbers. According to PFF, he had a 93.1 receiving grade, which is number one in the country. He averaged 3.64 yards per route run, which is absurd. Absolutely absurd. That is like up there with some of the best in college football history, especially with like his sample size of catches. 45.5% contested catch rate, which is middle of the road. But keep in mind, this guy had like a 66% contested catch rate last year, which is an elite number. This is a guy who is overall is a really good player. 90.8 grade versus man, according to PFF. But I'll add on to that is, I am reception perception, by Matt Harmon. You guys should check him out. They grade these guys versus man and zone. He had a 74.4 success rate versus man coverage, which was 84th percentile. 3/4 of the time he's exceeding his route versus man coverage. 78.6 versus zone, which you expect to have a little more success there. So it was only 46th percentile, but he is a man destroyer. Versus press coverage, 72.1% success rate, was 78th percentile. This guy, if you press him, you put him in the man, he's going to make you pay for it with his route running, his release package, his explosiveness. And, don't even get us started. Just, we really kind of glossed over it, but, truly one of the best wide receivers after the catch that we have seen, with 30 missed tackles forced this year. That was fourth in the country, but this year was a year with a lot of guys. 30 is like number one in the country in almost any other year. That is an insane amount of tackles forced. He will be surrounded by four guys. He'll break a tackle, use explosive to get to the sideline, house call something. So just a ridiculous player whose potential is, I would honestly say, limitless. This guy could be the greatest wide receiver in the league, and it wouldn't surprise me.
No, and I think we said that before. We said, would it
Yep.
I think I asked you in one of our episodes, like, would it surprise you at any point if we're looking back from the future and we see that Malik Nabers had a better NFL career than Marvin Harrison Jr., and you said no. And I would agree with you. Like, they're both very special. So listen, take all the other stuff away from it, like the quarterback thought. Obviously we're not gonna pretend none of this stuff ever happened, but at the end of the day, the Giants got a ridiculously great player,
You hope.
and you hope, and at least as a prospect,
Mhm.
and you got to maximize his career. That's all I'll say. You got to maximize this guy. It would be a damn shame if years went by without maximizing his play, especially on his rookie deal.
Yeah. And hopefully next year you're taking your quarterback and you have so a lot of Giants fans are banking on, and I definitely understand where they're coming from, that you're hoping this guy helps make your next quarterback be successful. He's a guy who helps him get through some of those like early developmental years and gives him his go-to target. So that's the hope with getting a guy this year, and passing on quarterback, and you hope that you can get one next year and you set him up in a good situation. So I'll mention it on each one of these guys. We obviously got Malik Nabers, six overall on the consensus big board. He was third. So we got which actually, funny enough, consensus big board, that's wild. He so I'm using my NFL mock draft database, which uses 211 big boards, 1,507 first round mock drafts, and then 1,371 team based mock drafts. And he actually ended up, based off of all that, 3 over Marvin Harrison Jr. That's crazy. We obviously disagree with that, but there was a lot of steam that picked up with him over Harrison. I would say his upside is as high, if not more, than Harrison. I just think Harrison was a much safer prospect. Not saying that Malik Nabers isn't safe. Marvin Harris is just as close to perfect as it gets.
Yep. All right. You want to go to our second round pick here?
Yeah, let's go down to our second round pick. I'll go ahead and introduce it. Tyler Nubin out of Minnesota, safety. We got him with our 47th pick in the draft. Tyler Nubin is 6'1", 205 pounds. He had a very solid year this year. He had 43 tackles and he had 5 interceptions. Over the last 3 years at Minnesota, he's had 12 interceptions. The guy who is a total ball hawk. I mean, leads Minnesota's program's history. He set a record for most interceptions. He's a turnover machine. He's a guy who can just read the eyes of the quarterback and bait this guy and make a play on the ball. He plays with intensity. One thing that he talked about is when he came to Minnesota, he learned from Antoine Winfield Jr. Antoine Winfield Jr. taught him how to watch film. He taught him how to command a defense, and he taught him to play with the intensity he plays with. And although I think they're different players, I definitely can see that when I play Tyler. I actually brought up Antoine Winfield Jr. last time we talked. There's just the competitiveness that he plays with reminds me of him. He is tough, smart, tough, dependable. That is definitely Tyler Nubin. All those things apply to him. A player I really liked. But I'll let you get in a little bit. What your thoughts on Tyler Nubin?
Yeah. So this is where you and I have a little bit of a process difference in our approach to the draft class. So I think people went crazy when I had some critique of the pick. We're going to critique some of these picks and kind of break them down in terms of just process. But make no mistake about it, these are 6 really good football players. Tyler Nubin is an outstanding football player. I think we both agree that I think he was our safety too when we did our our early season review, if I'm not mistaken, right behind Cam Kinchens, whose stock fell, unfortunately, throughout the year. And then he ended up going, I want to say, the 3rd round to the Rams.
Yeah, end of the 3rd.
Right. So, but Nubin was the more consistent player all year. Nubin is an outstanding coverage safety. I think that part of his game is really well documented. That this is a guy who, in usually 2 deep alignments to start the play, does a great job taking away half the field. Really good instincts in coverage, reading routes, and great instincts in breaking on the ball. Really, and just does an outstanding job breaking up passes. Has good ball skills. Had 5 interceptions, I think you mentioned, 2 touchdowns this year on those interceptions. And he's an enforcer in the run game when he's playing the run. He's very aggressive. He plays the ball downhill very aggressively. He likes to be involved. He likes to take away the run game when it's in front of him. He likes to attack the pass play when when it's anywhere in his territory. If there's a knock on him, it's that he's probably not good in single high. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think he really has sideline to sideline range like the true center fielders do. Like I don't think he has that kind of speed.
Yeah.
Um, I would say it's a small knock on him, but I
He
think
relies on
that
his instincts.
he's very instinctive. But then again, neither did Kyle Hamilton, right? Kyle
Mm-hmm.
Hamilton relied on his instincts too. So I don't go too crazy about that. I don't think you're utilizing him to the best of his ability, lining him up as a center fielder in a single high system. I think he's best aligned in cover two, like two deep like shells and rotating, which is what he did a lot of in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? That's what Shane Bowen does, right? He starts
Exactly.
most plays in within two deep alignment, and the safeties rotate to either move up or move to the side, or however they do it. They take on different assignments. He's very good at that. He's going to be a really good football player. There's nothing bad to say about Tyler Nubin. This is an extremely high floor player in my opinion. Like I don't see a huge miss opportunity here. He's a solid tackler. He's good against the run. He's solid against the pass. He has good ball skills. He has really solid instincts. All the makings of a very good NFL safety. This is a guy who's sort of like a plug and play, day one starting safety. Put him on your team, forget about him. He's going to handle his job very well and probably be one of the better safeties. Maybe not a top 10 safety. I don't know about that, but I think one of the better safeties in your division, potentially a little bit more. He definitely replaces the loss that Xavier McKinney left behind, the hole that he left behind by leaving. So I have no problem with him as a player. And I think he's gonna play very nicely in the Shane Bowen system.
Yeah. One thing I'll say before we kind of get into we'll talk about position of value and process. I'll say, when we went through these reviews of all the defensive players, at least one thing we tried to do, Wink Martindale was our defensive coordinator at the time. We tried to say, how will this guy fit in our defense? And we said, well, this guy's a great fit. This guy's not a good fit. I'll say, if I just thinking back of the players we reviewed, if I knew Shane Bowen was going to be our defensive coordinator, Tyler Nubin would have stood out more than probably anybody we reviewed, where this guy is a perfect fit for what Shane Bowen wants to do. So I'll say that, we didn't really get to go through it with that in mind, but going back, Tyler Nubin is incredible fit as a prospect for what Shane Bowen runs.
Yep, I agree. He's just a good football player. Now, not a lot of criticism here. I will just say this on the process issue, and this goes back to preaching patience. We're not a player or two away, right? If that's your philosophy, Joe Shane, I think it's fair to question, why are you taking a safety with the 47th overall pick? Not that Tyler Nubin isn't worthy of the 47th overall pick. That's a separate discussion. I think he is worthy of it. In fact, I think in our review, I said I think he's going to go somewhere between picks 40 and 50. So that was many months ago. So I was, right on the money there. You could ask the question, like, if you're rebuilding, if you're hitting the reset button, is it wise to use draft capital of that value on a safety? And the question becomes, well, what else could you have used it on? I like Mikey Sainer still. You can argue that's preference, but I think the value of a nickel corner is a little bit higher, especially an enforcer who's got ball skills like him. I think the better argument is probably for either a trade down, which I think was the right move at that spot, or taking one of the interior defensive linemen. This team is we traded for Brian Burns. It seems like the identity of the defense was going to be build up the front four and create a monstrous pass rush so that you can do pretty creative things with the back seven. We're one interior defensive lineman away from being able to do that. We needed specifically a good 3-tech. This draft class was loaded with really good pass rushing 3-techs. I mean, we talked about that before. This was a very strong class. And I thought that was the right play there if you weren't going to trade the pick. Guys like Chris Jenkins, who's not a great pass rusher, admittedly, but that wasn't what they asked him to do at Michigan. He's a phenomenal athlete and an amazing run stopper already, but his upside is tremendous as a D lineman. Mason Smith was there, but I think the right play was probably trade down. I'll be honest. I think if there were teams trading down all around them, I feel like if it was available, I would have preferred to trade down 5 spots, 10 spots, whatever, right? And if you don't get Nubin, it's okay,
Mhm.
right? It's okay, like, because you have other needs. You're not, again, to quote Joe Shane, you're not one or two players away.
Yeah.
You,
I
you
mean,
got to acquire talent.
Tyler Nubin didn't like fall into your lap unexpectedly. He was a great player, and I'll sit here and argue that I think he was BPA, but it wasn't like Johnny Newton fell in your lap. Cooper DeJean didn't fall in your lap. Kool-Aid McKinstry. It wasn't like even Jackson Power Johnson was a guy who started to get down there. I could have seen the argument just like, fuck, this is too good of a value to pass up. That's not the case. Like Tyler Nubin was a good pick there. He was a good value, but he wasn't too good to not like look into a trade down with, other guys that we really liked, and I'm sure they really liked that they would have had a shot on a trade down. So I'm definitely there with you. um we talked about this a good bit. The one thing I'll push back with this is, we were talking, yesterday, and you basically asked like, why would you, like, why are you taking him? What's the reason for taking a safety when, you're in this position and things like that? Basically, what I came back with is why not? Because for me, you look at BPA and look at, just our board, for example. You take wide receivers out of it. There's a couple wide receivers that we were high on available. A.D. Mitchell, Troy Lincoln, who ended up falling, but you take them out. The guys ahead of them: Zach Frazier, who center. We didn't really need center. Christian Haynes, who we loved, and we can get into that next pick, but he was there at the next pick. And then Tyler Nubin. There's Tyler Nubin, then Mike Sanders still. And, Tyler Nubin's 38. And then you can go down to Chris Jenkins, 46. If you want to get a bit more of the, it's not a huge gap, but as far as, if you want to go more position of value. But the thing is, Tyler Nubin has a lot of value in our defense. And yes, you're not getting the huge savings that you're getting for some other positions. Highest paid safeties are getting paid around like 18 million. Highest paid defensive tackles are getting paid around 24, 25 million. You're definitely getting a savings there. But I do think that BPA, a position of need on your team, and an extremely valuable position in your defense, that's where I will push back that I really do think that Tyler Nubin made a ton of sense where he took him. We'll go through it more. Like, I'm upset we didn't get an interior defensive lineman in general, but I thought it was a really deep class where we didn't have to take here. I thought we would have and did have opportunities to do it in further rounds. But I don't want to knock Tyler Nubin because we made mistakes later in the draft. So that's kind of where I stand on.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to. I think when the pick happened, I got on a space with our friend Ivan and some others, and they asked me, "What do you think of him?" I said, "He's a really good football player. It's a good pick." I mean, that it's separating the player from the process is just all I'm saying, right? And the process is tied to what the GM himself is saying the direction of the organization is. That's all. This is using his words and his mentality, and and that's why I'm like, okay, that's fine. You're not going to go wrong by drafting Tyler Nubin, but are you doing the right thing overall by sticking and picking in a strong class? At least the top 120 is strong. Shouldn't you be trying to acquire some assets here when there's so many good players on the board? So that's it. It's a minor. It's just a minor commentary. It's not even a criticism. It's a commentary. And I'm just this goes to my general theme of like I'm going to hold Joe Shane accountable to his words, right? Which is it? Are we competing? Are we rebuilding? You got to have some sort of direction. You have to have a guiding star here. But look, all that said, I'm not going to beat that horse to death. Tyler Nubin's a really good football player. We both agree. He was our safety one coming into the draft. I don't expect anything less than him being our starting number one safety going into the season, and that's that.
Yeah, I'll just get in some stats because we, kind of finish this off here on Tyler Nubin. Tyler Nubin, he was a data darling according to PFF this year. I'd also like mention this guy was what? I think he's a 6-year senior, but like he is not a 6-year senior because he's struggled in previous years and broke out this year. He could have came out last year. He probably could have came out the year before. He's been a good safety for a very long time. He was safety 2 for us for a reason going into this year. Like he could have came out in the previous draft. He probably would have been the best true safety in that entire draft because you look at guys like Brian Branch, who are more of like a nickel corner safety hybrid. Tyler Nubin, look, it's 90.1 coverage grade according to PFF. He had a 9.4 percent missed tackle rate, which is really good for the safety position. A 20% forced incompletion rate. His average depth of run tack was 10.9. I mean, that kind of goes to where we were saying he played a lot of deep safety, either too high or one high in that defense. So, you saw him firing down to try to make plays in a run defense often, sometimes a little bit too aggressive and would mess up an angle and miss his assignment. But, other times he blew the hell up out of a play, and he was fun to watch in that sense. I mentioned he had 12 interceptions over the last 3 years. He had a 39.6 passer rating allowed this year. I think it was 33 passer rating over the last 3 years, I think I read, according to PFF. And funny enough is when we were reviewing Tyler Nubin, I think it was in October, he actually had a 0. When we did that review, he had a 0 passer rating allowed at that time. So that's pretty incredible. He went that far into the season, and people didn't complete a pass on him at the time. So he had interceptions to show for it. So, this is a really good player. He plays. One thing I said, like, at the time that excites me, he plays with like the aggressiveness and like the demeanor of like what I usually see out of kind of like these smaller safeties, like the Tyrann Matthews of the world. Like, but this guy's like 6 foot and he plays with that same mentality that you see out of those guys. So that's what's something I really like enjoy when I watch Tyler Nubin play football.
Yeah, he's just fun to watch. I think Giant fans will really enjoy him.
Yeah, he's a good dude, and he promised no ATVs, so that's a plus. Did you see that on Twitter?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, he's got a sense of humor. I appreciate him. All right, let's go to our next pick.
Yeah.
All right, and I think this is the most controversial pick the Giants made. It's pick
Especially
70 overall. Yeah, so with the 70th pick, in the third round, the Giants took cornerback Andru Phillips out of the University of Kentucky. This was a guy the Giants had in for a top 30 visit. They were linked to him aggressively. A lot of people were saying this. By the way, everybody's like, oh, the Giants keep everything secret now. Why did everybody know they were taking Andru Phillips, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, the Giants were linked to him. Andru Phillips, I think, is a guy that we're going to have a little conversation about. So, I mean, the basics about him, this is a guy who played both outside and inside as a cornerback at Kentucky. Played a little bit more on the inside this past year. Played in a fairly zone-heavy scheme, which we don't think really served him well.
No.
He's about 5'10", 190. He had good speed. I think he ran a 4.48 at the combine. What stands out when you watch Andru Phillips? Well, number one, his production is not good. Let's just go there, right?
No.
His ball skill, his production numbers are not there. He had 0 interceptions in his college career. His ball skills are not very good, and that's not just interceptions; it's just breakups. Plays on the ball. He played in a zone scheme, and I don't think it fit him very well. He played off man a lot, or in zone. And when you watch him, like, what stands out, and this could be the scheme that he played in Kentucky, was he played way off the ball, like way off the ball. The good is that he looks like a very fluid athlete when you watch him. I can see what coaches like about him. Like, he was high on Brugler's list, high on Jeremiah's list. Very fluid, flips his hip real easily, very silky smooth with the transition. He seems like he can run with almost everybody. His long speed is pretty solid. I don't think he can run with the fastest guys, but not everybody can run with the fastest guys in terms of deep speed. But in terms of most routes and most receivers, he can run with them. He flips quickly, and he can be kind of sticky. And I think all those things are good. Here, I think he's an aggressive player. That's what he gets credit for. I think that's what people like about him. They say, oh, he's very aggressive. He comes forward and he's aggressive in the run game. That is true. He's aggressive. So he's got a tenacious mentality. He's fluid. He's athletic. All those things are good. And I think all that is projectable with coaching to some extent. And that's the upside that you're looking for. But here are the downsides. He plays off man a lot, and he's backtracking, and he gives a lot of cushion. And I mean a lot of cushion. So number one, good teams figured that out pretty quickly. and he would just get burned over and over again on comeback routes, like over and over again. Comeback routes are just easy money against him because as well as he goes backwards, he does a really bad job coming forward in coverage. Like he
Yeah, I
seems to
saw
get
that.
stuck. He seems to get stuck in the mud. The plays in front of him, and he can't get there. And that's a problem because if you're going to play off man, which Shane Bowen does, you got to be able to click and close real quick. And I don't think he does that very well, actually. Not coming
Mhm.
forward. Um,
Yeah, I agree.
his lack of ball skills we talked about. He's despite the lack of ball skills, when he's at the catch point, he's very handsy. Like he grabs, he tugs, his hands are all over the place. You get away with that at college. That is a penalty in the NFL. Like there's a big
Yep.
difference in how that's called in college to the NFL. So he could be a pass interference machine with the way he plays right now. Now, to be fair, they said about Deontay Banks too coming out, right? So he cleaned it up, but that is something to watch out for. Um, Again, he doesn't offer much in terms of ball skills, and in run support, which is where people think he's great. I have to tell you, man, I thought he was really bad against the run.
I
Like,
did too.
yeah. So, a couple things stand out against the run. When the play is in front of him and there is a running play, one, he looks like he just stops. He's like a step or two like behind before he starts moving. He just doesn't seem to diagnose it well, or
Mhm.
maybe it takes him a while to get going forward. I don't know what it is, but he seems a little bit slow. Then he takes kind of strange angles to the ball. Like he
Yeah.
doesn't always take the best angle to the ball. And when he gets there, the way he tackles is very concerning to me. He is a lunger. Like he throws himself like a torpedo at people
Mhm.
and he lunges with one arm and he misses a crap ton of tackles. I think his missed tackle rate was like 23%. It was some
Yeah, I think that was right.
unacceptably high number. And it showed up on tape. Like he missed a bunch of tackles where he was in position. He doesn't wrap people up and take them down. He throws himself at them with his head down. And not only you're going to miss tackles in the NFL doing that, you're going to get a concussion doing that. So there's a lot of refinement that's needed. This is like a traits guy as far as I'm concerned that they're taking here, and
Yeah.
they're hoping he becomes a player. But I think there's so many deficiencies in his game. If he plays like he played at Kentucky in the NFL, I fear he's the weak link on the defense, and offensive coordinators and quarterbacks are going to absolutely blow this guy up. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with a lot of what you said. I mean, those were a lot of concerns saw. I mean, adding on to the run defense, I'm with you. I constantly just saw him out of position when it came to like make the play on the run. He and to with that, I think led to some of his bad tackling was he would put himself in a bad position, then would be diving at ankles to try to make a play. I thought I saw some good tackling at times and then some really piss poor tackling at other times. So I think it is there. I'm more concerned about his run defense than I am about his tackling. And I'll say it that way, but I know exactly what you're talking about with that, like torpedo tackling. And I think it often happened when he was out of position. Um, you know, he like you said, he's a guy that analysts liked a lot, but fans have not been as high on him. When I say that, I don't just mean like people who didn't watch him. I mean like people who I know watch all 22 and things like that are not as high on Andru Phillips. One thing I think worth mentioning when we're on the topic, our friend Mason mentioned it in a space, and I thought it was interesting. He was kind of just alluding to it's like, are these like experts watching like different games than you guys are? And that made me think. It was like, look, a lot of us fans are watching the same games because we're using the same services that only offer a few games. And when we did our review, for example, and I talked how much I hated Andru Phillips when we did our top 30. I watched that Missouri game. You can see it right there if you're watching right now. He had a 40.7. It was his worst grade of the season. He got killed versus Missouri. That was a awful game, and it was his worst game of the season. And granted, a lot of what I saw in other games, but it was exaggerated in that game. And you know, um, you know, I don't know if he was better in other games. Like you see that Clemson game, I didn't have advantage of that. He had a really good grade. I don't know if maybe they saw things in that I miss in ours, but I think that may be part of it. That's an interesting theory. I think another part of it, which I've talked about, is I think it was really hard to judge him in this zone defense. You mentioned it, but I did not think it was a good fit for him at all. I
Oh,
think I think, when it comes to Shane Bowen, I could be a good fit. Playing because you'll be in man. It depends how far off they play him. I think like you can play off man, but he can't play way off. If he plays way off, I think it's going to be a problem for him. Use that athleticism and let him run with guys. Don't, he can, when you ask him to like sit there and redirect guys or stand there and redirect guys, like he can do it. They just never did it in college. At least from what I saw, I didn't see it enough to say for sure he can do it, I guess. But from what the little examples I saw, I felt like he could do it. But yeah, I mean, no interceptions, man. Like you said, run defense and I felt he was always leaving a little bit too much space, and he didn't close that gap nearly enough when he was playing. I definitely have my questions about Andru Phillips. I trust guys like Dane Brugler. I trust guys like Daniel Jeremiah. I trust guys like Jim Nagy, who all love this guy. They loved it. This was all their sleeper. They all had him really high in their board. That's comforting. Although that I don't feel quite a way. But when you read Dane Brugler's like Beast Guide, he kind of saying similar things to us.
he said the exact same things and came to a completely different conclusion on value.
Yeah, he's like, but I
Yeah.
like him. Yeah, I mean, look, he guy play. I think a lot of it comes down to is, like you said, his projection to an extent. He's really athletic. He's decent size. Like I know he's gonna play slot corner, but 5'11", like, what was it? I have it right here.
It was like he's like 190,
Yeah,
187, 190 something.
or
Yeah.
5'10" and 6'8", 190. Ran a
Mhm.
4.48, jumped 42 inches, 11-foot 3-inch broad. Like, really, really impressive numbers. And you can see how people would like that. Um, you know, I I'll also say this is a guy who, from my understanding, absolutely killed the pre-draft process. I was listening to things about him. I watched some reps of him at the Senior Bowl, and that which kind of makes me feel better about him playing a man. He absolutely toasted wide receivers and one-on-ones. And you watch the wide receivers he went against, and he went against some really good wide receivers, and he held them down. So that was step one. And I was listening to Field Yates talk about him, and he was saying like he was one of those guys where he would get on the phone with a coach or a scout, and like you have to be careful bringing up Andru Phillips' name, because you bring up Andru Phillips, you'll be on the phone for the next 15 minutes talking about him, because they talked about how much they loved him. They loved like his character, like his competitiveness, and like everything about this dude. So that's the part of it we don't get to see either. Like we don't get to see that part of it, and you can see that he's competitive on the football field. That's not surprising to me, but there's a lot out there that he is like the guy that you want from like a person standpoint and a player standpoint. So,
Yeah.
so
Well,
that's positive.
I mean, I'll close it out with this. I don't see enough on tape. I don't see enough in advanced stats. I don't see enough in the production that makes me feel good about this player at all. However, I'm gonna just say what I'm hanging my hat on is guys like Jeremiah and Brugler who do this all the time, who I respect, really like him. I'm hoping they're right. Um, Watching a lot of college football, guys like this, you just rarely see them translate. Guys who
Mhm.
cannot produce at the college level, it's unless they're elite testers, right? I mean, like off the charts elite testers in their unique circumstances, they rarely come to the NFL and hyper exceed you know, their college production. There has to be something about them that makes you think that that makes me think they're going to take a leap to the next level. I don't know. I have my questions. We'll see. You know, we will see. But in any case, let's move on because I don't want to spend any more time on Andru Phillips. I think it'll be a talk of
Yeah.
of camp a lot. We're going to see a lot about that.
The
Um,
the one last thing I want to mention, because I didn't, and I'll mention for Nubin too, because I forgot to do it in the last one. I want to try to give like where we took them compared to the consensus big board. Tyler Nubin, what I didn't bring it up, was actually 47. Picked him 47. Pretty funny that ended up working out that way. Just going back to people kind of liking this kid. Andru Phillips, we took at 70, and he's 75 in big board. So again, a guy in that area. Some people were higher than others. So, not necessarily a reach, even though we don't feel the best about this kid.
A lot of projection on this one. Lots
Yeah.
of it. So you better hope you're right here.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's go to the Giants' next pick. Fourth round pick 107. Tight end Theo Johnson out of Penn State. So third straight year that the Giants have used a pick right in this range in some way, shape, or form on a tight end. In Joe Shane's first draft, 2022, he picked Daniel Bellinger with pick 112. Last year, he traded pick 100, which was the comp pick that he got in the Kadarius Toney trade. He traded that pick for
Yeah.
Darren Waller, and he used pick 107 this year on Theo Johnson. If Giants are ever, as long as Joe Shane is GM, if you have a pick between 100 and 115, just write down tight end du jour, and that's who he's taking at that pick, it seems, because that's his strategy. Theo Johnson is he's a combine warrior, and he's a good football player. So why don't you, can you tell us a little bit more about this guy?
Sure. I'd love to, because, there was other people that necessarily on the board, and we can get into that. We haven't talked too much about that yet, but like that I had like day 2 grades on. But as far as just like Theo Johnson and the process of taking him day 3, this is the exact type of pick I want. I want to take swings in day 3. And part of that is taking a guy who is an athletic freak here. And personally, like, it, out of all positions that I want to take swings on athletic freaks on, it's the tight end position. The tight end that's the position where it's really hard to use stats and project these guys to the NFL, because colleges are so bad at using these tight ends that you're better off getting the best athletes and trying to turn them into tight ends in the NFL. And you see teams do it time after time. We'll see if it works for us, but you see these like 3rd, 4th, 5th round athletic freaks just take off at the next level. Theo Johnson, 6'6", 259 pounds, is a 10 1/4 inch hands, 33-inch arms, ran a 4.57, 39.5-inch vertical jump, 10'5" broad jump, 4.19 short shuttle, 7.15 3-cone. He had a perfect 10 RAS score at one point. I think it ended up getting knocked down a little bit, but after his bench, I believe,
if I recall.
Yeah, I think it was bench press of 19 reps knocked it down a little bit. But like a guy who athletically compares to Jimmy Graham, like almost perfectly. It's athletic freak. But getting into what you see on the field, I'll say this: it shows. He's not just a guy like Daniel Bellinger, for example. We were talking about like, oh, this guy's the same RAS score as Travis Kelce. Like, no, you watch Theo Johnson, you can tell he's athletic. This is a guy who, when I watch him, he is very quick in and out of cuts. He definitely, we'll talk, like, he's not a refined route runner, and there's a lot that he needs to get better there. But when he is moving laterally, I can see him like explode out of certain moves that he's doing. He's a guy who's really good at understanding leverage and using his big body to shield the defender away from him. And then it's also just a really, really underrated run blocker. I don't see enough people talking about how solid the guy is at run blocking. I mean, like maybe just because he's 6'6", 260, and they expect him to be getter because he's huge. But like, I don't know. He's a really good run blocker. He's a guy who you're going to be able to put on the field, and he'll move people. He'll make plays. He'll open up plays in the run game. Like it's not just like, I don't want to sit here and say he's not a liability, because that's underselling his run blocking. He is a genuinely good run blocker who's going to continue to get better at the next level and offers insane upside as a receiver with his size and athletic ability. Lot needs to be refined there, but man, this is the guy that if 4 years from now you tell me that he ends up being one of those late round tight ends that shocks everybody and becomes like a superstar. I'm not counting on it, but it wouldn't surprise me. He matches the profile you look for. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, when they initially took him out, part of me was like, good value. Did we really just take another tight end in the same spot? I remember that was my initial thought. Like, are we doing this again? But a good player. And I have to be honest, man. I went back and watched his. So I did two things. I said, let me go back and rewatch his film, which I watched a few games, and you and I were sharing thoughts on that. And then I went back and looked at his advanced stats, his analytics, his data, everything. And there are a few players whose advanced stats and production numbers through data are so dissociated from what you see on the film.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Theo Johnson is really he's poorly served by his stats and his advanced stats. Start with the blocking. For a guy his size, like you said, he's big enough to be in line, and he's often in line. In the Ohio State game, for example, he's blocking JT Tuamaloa. Like, he's holding him down in the same game that Olufashanu was getting worked by the same guy.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because Olufashanu needs to build up some functional strength, right? And JT Tuamaloa is a pure power rusher. And this guy's strong. He's built like an offensive tackle, and he's got a lot of good functional strength, on top of his frame. So he can be a good inline pass blocker. He's almost like having a smaller extra offensive tackle out there, which is valuable. I mean, there's not a lot of guys who can do that and be a threat in different ways, like in the pass game. As a run blocker, like you mentioned, they aligned him all over the place. He lined it as an F, as an H-back, in motion. I posted the clip yesterday on Twitter that he's a real ass goon, because I love that play against Ohio State. The wham block, where he's lined up as a sniffer, he comes in motion, and oh my God, did he just decimate number 7 on Ohio State? I mean, just absolutely. And the guy, to be fair, he trips a little, but that didn't stop Theo Johnson from running over him like a freaking freight train, and just killing him. He plays with a level of aggression as a blocker that you just love to see as a tight end, right? Like, he just mows people down. So in the run game, he's athletic enough to be a move tight end. In the pass game, he's strong enough and sturdy enough to stick as an inline blocker. That right there gets you on the field. It gets you on an NFL roster, right? If you can do those two things, you're going to make a roster. There's a place for you in the NFL. You're not a liability. You're a strength in both the pass and run game. Now his receiving, with his athleticism, you would think there's more upside there as a receiver, and I think there is. I don't think he's a good route runner right now.
Yeah.
I think we saw that his routes are kind of they're a little bit sloppy. I would say they're rounded. They're not sharp. Like, compare him to a guy like Ben Sinnott, who's a very, very sharp route runner. Right, his routes are outstanding at the stem. That's what made him so good. That's really what stands out when you watch him. Same thing with Brock Bowers, obviously. It's not like that with Theo Johnson. He's lumbering into his routes, and he rounds them out. What he does well, though, is two things. He understands how to get good leverage on his routes. Like, he gets in good position, and he's so massive that he presents a huge target, and he catches the ball away from his frame with his gigantic arms and mitts. He presents a massive target for his quarterback, right? So even if he's not a great route runner, like, you can easily get him the ball, and it's a safe completion a lot of times. He is underserved by Drew Allar's play at Penn State. Like, that was that was some awful quarterback play I was watching. Like, there are plenty of plays, and I posted one, I clipped it up on Twitter, where he's just running like a simple route over the middle of the field. He gets inside leverage on, I think it was a safety who was on him, maybe it was a linebacker. The guy's not far away from him. He doesn't have a ton of separation, but he clearly has leverage, and he's got his arms out, and the ball just sails like God knows where. And Aller has there's nothing but, like, he's just got clear vision of him right in front of him. So this is a guy where bad quarterback play is going to make him a non-factor in the passing game, because I don't think he can do a lot on his own. He needs good ball placement. But if he gets good ball placement, I think he's a guy who can get a lot of forced missed tackles, a lot of yak, and a lot of things you look for in tight ends. I really believe that. Unfortunately, he's coming to a quarterback situation that is going to mirror what he saw at Penn State, most likely this year. I mean, to be honest, like, I don't know what's left of Daniel Jones. I never thought too much of him to begin with. After the injuries, I don't know what's there. I have fun with the Drew Lock stuff, but Drew Lock is bad. He's not a good football player. He's not a good quarterback. He's very inaccurate. He's wild. I don't know how that serves this guy well. So year one, I'm not expecting a ton from him. I think you're going to see a lot of good blocking, and I think we're going to see him used in 12 personnel as a run blocker, and maybe like some simple route running, right? Like the short, like you were mentioning, like the short area routes. He's very good at kind of like sneaking away and getting a little separation. I
Mhm.
think simple stuff like throws to the flat, leaking out, stuff like that. I think he'll be used a lot, but I don't think you're going to see a lot of route development this first year just because of quarterback play. What do you think?
Yeah, man. I agree with you. I think he's going to be used a lot like kind of like that Daniel Bellinger type role, which I think is you're not utilizing him to his fullest ability, but I don't think that Daniel Jones, at least Daniel, maybe Drew Lock will be different, but Daniel Jones is shown as a guy who will take those shots when it's just like him shielding himself off and not open, but you can throw it up to him. You saw even with Darren Waller, who's a great player. It was limited sample size, but you've seen it over his career that and you won't hit him in stride. Again, another Drew Aller issue. I mean, look, Theo Johnson, you look at this, he had 2 missed tackles forced this year. Yards after catch, five per reception, but look, like that was a lot of what came from Drew Aller. When he did get the ball in stride, you saw him make plays. He is a decent player after the catch. It really, again, just shows these stats not really showing how good of a player he is. I think I think Theo Johnson is somebody who, in time, can develop into a really good football player. I think he's the guy that Giants fans should really need to be patient with this year. I don't think he is going to. I could be wrong, but tight ends in general usually take a long time to develop,
Yeah.
and I think one, he's a developmental guy. 2, tight ends take a long time to develop. 3, I don't think he's in a good position to utilize his abilities this year. So that's what I don't feel great about. But I think if we're all patient with him, I see the movement abilities from him that I do think he can develop into
Hmm.
a good route runner. I see it in flashes. I see a guy who I think can be good after the catch. I see a guy who's a good blocker. I see a ton of upside where this guy could be a really good tight end in this league. I think the value what you got Theo Johnson here at was it 107 was really, really good. I mean,
Yep.
one comparison I was making to you, like a guy I wasn't super high on last year. That a lot of other people were. People call him a first rounder, ended up going the second round, was Luke Musgrave. And
Hmm.
people loved Luke Musgrave. Luke Musgrave, was an athletic freak, and he was. And like I have some other comparisons I want to drop for you guys, but I want to just drop this one on the top here. Just the RS scores of Luke Musgrave and Theo Johnson side by side, like similar height, similar size. Both had 19 bench reps, 4.57 to 4.61, 39.5-inch vertical to 36, 10.5 broad jump, 10.5 broad jump, 4.19 shuttle to 4.41, 7.15, 3 cone to 7.09. Like all really similar numbers between Theo Johnson and Luke Musgrave. And again, I don't think this is something where it popped on Luke Musgrave's tape and didn't pop on Theo Johnson. To me, they both looked really athletic. Both did not have a ton of production in college. Luke Musgrave, he got hurt. He had the COVID year. There's reasons, but he did not have a ton of production in college. And add on top of that, I didn't think Luke Musgrave was a good blocker. I think Luke Musgrave is horrendous after the catch. I saw that man get tackled by 180-pound safeties and corners and couldn't break a tackle to worth his life. I don't understand why that guy and he's a little bit more refined as a route runner and all that stuff, and that's fine. But I don't get why that guy was so highly regarded and Theo Johnson is not. Because Theo Johnson does a lot of things better that I don't think Luke Musgrave will ever do that great, at least from a run after the catch. To me, the run after the catch is not something you teach. I think that's something you have. And I know Theo Johnson's numbers do not show it. I don't think he is an elite run after the catch. I think guys like Ben Sinnott, and that's why I liked him, was like he's really good. But I think he offers something after the catch. Well, I don't think Luke Musgrave offered anything, much like Mike Gesicki was in very much in the same way. And you saw that carry over in the NFL, despite how athletic he was. He never offered anything after the catch. I think Theo Johnson is a guy who I think just I like more. I'll say this. I like him more than I like Luke Musgrave as a prospect. So I'm a big fan of this guy, man. I who knows what he ends up being, but I think the potential is through the roof, and I think at the very least he'll be a quality tight end.
Yeah, I think that's fair. All right, let's go on to. I mean, I'm curious to see how the Giants use him, but there are a lot of ways. But I think I like you. I view him as more of a developmental player this year, and I'm fine with that. We have Daniel Bellinger, who should be a mature tight end.
Yep.
Let's go on to the fifth round pick that the Giants made.
Sounds good.
The Giants. Go ahead.
One thing I'll just say, Theo Johnson, 90 on consensus big board, drafted in 107. So got some value there. But yeah, go ahead and introduce our next guy.
So again, Joe Shane just stick and pick all the way down the draft with the 6 picks. So the fifth round pick was pick 166. This was a pick swap with the Carolina Panthers as part of the Brian Burns trade, where they sent pick. I want to say it was 144. No, 141. They sent to Carolina as part of the pick swap in the Brian Burns trade, and they got pick 166. So just out of curiosity, 141 was Cedric Van Pran, the center from Georgia, went to Buffalo. There was another trade from Carolina. At 166, the Giants take running back Tyrone Tracy Jr. from Purdue. And this is maybe the most intriguing player they took throughout the week, and really a fascinating prospect. So Tyrone Tracy is a kid who is a recent convert to the running back position. Initially a wide receiver. He was originally at Iowa for 3 years, played wide receiver, went to Purdue in 2022, started getting a few more reps as a running back, and then made the full transition to running back in 2023. He got 114 carries for 714 yards. He averaged 6.3 yards per attempt. He had 8 touchdowns. His yards after contact was 4.44, which is elite. He had an elite elusive grade. It's hard for me to pull it up there, but you guys can see it there. His advanced metrics were through the roof. He had, I think, 25 runs of more than 10 yards, which is right up there with like the top of the class. Mostly a zone runner, but did well in all ways. He had 14 breakaway runs, 15 plus yards. And he was obviously a weapon in the pass game as a receiver. Not a huge weapon, but 19 receptions on 25 targets for 129 yards. So a recent convert to the position of running back really had an incredible year. And I think because he's new to the position, his stock was not as high as it could have been. There might be some significant value here in Tyrone Tracy. He is highly athletic. He has a total RAS score of 9.87. That is largely driven by his explosive testing. His vertical was 40 inches. He had a 10-foot, 4-inch broad jump. His 40-yard dash was 4.48, which is great, with a 1.53 10-yard split. He had a 8.61 shuttle and an 8.58 3-cone. So, meaning in his rating. So his actual time was 4.08 and 8.81. All really outstanding numbers. He's 5'11", 209. When you watch him on film, though, for a guy who recently came to the position, even though he's a little older, he's about 23. Number one, he doesn't have a lot of tread on those tires, right? I don't care how old he is as a running back. If you're taking him this late, number one, because who cares, right? You're probably not giving him a second contract, but he doesn't have the typical tread on his tires that these other college running backs do, because he just started running as a running back. But for a guy who just got there, man, when you watch this guy play football, he looks like he's been playing running back for a long time. He runs like a natural. So a few things that I noted watching his film, as a runner, he has pretty good field vision. Like for a guy who just got there, he seems to be able to see his block setup, especially in zone blocking, and hit the holes nicely. He has good footwork. and he makes guys miss. He has incredibly good contact balance for a guy who wasn't a running back. He gets through contact and keeps driving his legs and gets a lot of yards. That is reflected in that 4.44 yards after contact. Really productive and efficient runner. But I'll tell you what stood out to me the most when I watched his film, and I was shocked by this, was how good of a pass protector he was. I mean, in there, I watched specifically the Michigan game against the top team in the country, and he stood back there, and often in shotgun formations with Michigan blitzing and throwing all sorts of different looks and NFL style defense at Purdue, and he stood in there and just play after play, he picked up the blitz, he picked up the rusher, gave his quarterback time. I mean, for a guy who has not been a running back, that was really advanced stuff I was watching. So why did I bring that up? If you can pass protect as a running back, you're an every down player, potentially, right? You can be put on the field in any situation if you're a trustworthy pass protector. So I really like this kid. I mean, he's got good speed. He has good footwork. He gets yards after contact.
Mm-hmm.
He's a good pass protector. And I'm starting there. I was talking about this earlier. I'm like, are we sure this guy is not like is this guy our RB2, potentially our RB1? So I'll leave it at that with you. What do you think?
Yeah, man. I'll say this pick came up. There was a lot of running backs that I was praying that fell to us, and I wanted us to move up, but we didn't get it. And I didn't look into Tyrone Tracy enough, like before the draft. He's, one of the guys that I really didn't dive into just based off of, I think a lot of it was just it's his stats that you look there, and he only had 714 yards rushing, 8 touchdowns. Like I overlooked him. So, I'll channel my inner Shaq. I owe you an apology. I wasn't familiar with your game. Tyrone Tracy. Tyrone Tracy is the exact. I don't know how I didn't look at him, because I sorted the stats that I really value, and I just continued to look over this dude because he is exactly what I look for. And anybody who watches this knows one of the main things that I look for that I think translates better than anything else, and that's yard after contact and broken tackles, and specifically broken tackles per touch. Broken tackles per touch. He had 1.18, which was third in this class. In yards after contact, he had 4.44, which was number 1 in this class. I mean, Tyrone Tracy is a guy who his contact balance is insane. Like, especially for a guy that's a wide receiver convert. Absolutely insane. And it's funny, and another thing that I kept bringing up that I thought would be important to these guys was pass catching ability. You looked how interested they were in James Cook. You look at the type of guys that, they drafted in Buffalo. It was clear that they value pass catching. And Tyrone Tracy, former wide receiver, I'll say maybe not as good of a pass catcher as you'd expect from a former wide receiver. Still really good. But it's not like we have a top 5 pass catching running back in the league now because we have Tyrone Tracy. He's just really good at it. He's not elite by any means, but he's very good. I like this guy a lot, man. I think he's a guy who's still learning the position. There's flashes of where I can really see if he just continues to develop the nuances of the position, that I think he could be a really good running back. And I know he's an older guy, and you don't expect older guys to develop normally, but like, the thing is, he just made the position switch, and he's good at so many aspects over. He's such a natural with, set like making cuts especially in like open field, and finding a hole out there, and setting up defenders, and keeping his balance, and exploding through, and things like that. It's just more of like the line of scrimmage stuff that he kind of needs to get better at. It's like, waiting for his like offensive line to set up blocks, and, anticipating holes to come open, and things like that. He anticipates well, like at the next level, just not necessarily at the line of scrimmage. So, I said, we were talking about this earlier, and I'll tell you this. I think Tyrone Tracy will immediately have a role in this offense. Get ready to learn orbit motion, buddy. He's going to
Yeah,
be a big part in that, and he's going to probably be our third down back, and things along those lines to start. But I think by the end of this season, Tyrone Tracy will be getting the majority of our carries in our backfield. I truly believe it. He is a talented football player who I think if wasn't 25 years old, let's say he was 21 and he started playing this position earlier, he would have gone 2 rounds earlier, at least. So
yeah,
what else do you have?
yeah. I mean, there's a lot of projection, right? Like we just don't know. He's had 117 carries. That's it last year. That's it. And really not much before that. So, but like I said, what you see is very impressive. So I think they're gonna use him sparingly in the beginning, like you said, third down back. A lot of special teams play. Don't be, he's a good returner. So, with the new kickoff rule, I think
Yep.
he's a threat there. Like I said, he's a good pass protector. He's going to find his way on the field. But like I agree with you. I think his play will dictate if he gets more snaps. This is a guy I think they want to put out there and see what he does in the snaps he gets. And if he looks anything like what he looked like in the snaps he got last year, you're going to see gradual increase in his snaps, I think, as the gears goes on. And they're probably, as they're shifting to running back by committee, I think by the end of the season, I do think he's going to be closing in on being fairly like close to what Devin Singletary is doing in terms of snaps. So, and I think that's the intention. How they use Eric Gray, I don't know. I don't know what this means for him. I think they're very similar prototypes. I think the fact that this guy can block well in pass protection gives him a big leg up, and the fact that he's a better player in special teams gives him a big leg up over Eric Gray. But I'm curious to see how they handle it. But I like the player. Like it's a good football player. It's a good pick. You're not getting too many higher impact players at that part of the draft, and
Yeah.
it's a damn good pick. So that's Tyrone Tracy. You want to
Yeah.
go on to our final pick here, or do you have any more good thoughts on him?
I'm basically done. I just wanted to, add on to what he's saying where I do think he'll be a very good special team player. And, with these kickoff rule changes, I think that adds to his value. A guy who averaged 25.5 yards per return, which is pretty crazy, has really, really good numbers for a kick return, and also took one back to the house last year. So already with the old rules where they basically got rid of kick returns in football, he was doing really well. So, credit to him, and I hope he gets back there. And I know you're struggling to read some of the numbers here, so just close it out. 90.5 rushing grade, 80.7 zone grade, 89.8 gap grade, 163.5 elusiveness rating, and 4.4 yards after contact. I said that one before, but all those are basically elite numbers. So, another day to Darlin, man, and I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled with the pick. I think you got a really good football player who I think will have an impact. I'm sad you missed out some of the guys I liked more, but I'm learning that I like this guy. Probably should have been somebody I was paying more attention to previously. So pick 166 consensus big board, 148. Another guy you got pretty good value compared to the consensus big board. So, yeah, if that's all, I'm ready to move on to the last guy.
All right, last guy, 6th round pick, Darius Muasau, linebacker from UCLA. And I think maybe since we're alternating, why don't you give us a little intro on him, and we'll break down his game real quickly.
Sure. So my initial reaction was definitely I did not love the pick. I mean, a guy who came in under 6 feet tall, a guy who weighs only 225 pounds, and with that ran a 4.740. Vert jump 36 and a half is not bad, but really that 40 time matched with that weight. That scared me, and I knew right away this has to be a special teams pick. And then the stuff came out where our new special teams coordinator was actually his special teams coordinator when he played at Hawaii before transferring to UCLA, and he was a very, very good special teamer there at Hawaii. So it makes sense he was interested in him. He was actually special teams MVP his freshman year there, and he went on to be a special teams captain in his third year there before transferring to UCLA, captain general, but still playing a lot of roles on the special teams. But you know, obviously that stuff makes me worried with the size and things like that, but incredibly productive player, a guy who, 61 tackles, 104 tackles, 109 tackles, 91 tackles, 75 tackles. He put 440 tackles over his collegiate career. A guy who, yes, is smaller, but a guy who is very instinctive. A guy who, despite his size, despite his speed, found ways to play and make plays. If you're looking at some of these PFF numbers, actually pretty impressive. 72.8 pass rushing grade. I mean, I think that more comes from his blitzing, which they did use him a good bit, and he was pretty successful. 74.3 run defense grade. He was good there. 85.7 coverage grade. That one definitely surprised me, but some of that stuff can get inflated at the linebacker position. He wasn't, I just think he was bad at average depth of run tackle, 2.1, really low. You saw he was basically only playing in the box. He played close to the line of scrimmage. I think I was smart with his size. You and I were talking about this earlier, Sal. Ultimately, this is a special teams pick. That's obviously what this is. But the hope is that, you spent picks on Cam Brown. You spent picks on Carter Coughlin. And those guys were good special teamers for you. Very solid special teams players. Cam Brown was a captain for you at one point. I don't think either of them were phenomenal, but they were good. I think this is your replacement for him. This guy, I think, will, again, be maybe even better, but he'll be a good special teamer. But hopefully the goal, and he has a lot of experience and a very instinctive football player who's really not bad at anything. He's not great at anything, but he's not bad at anything. That this guy can actually provide depth in that linebacker room, unlike Cam Brown, who did not play a single rep on defense over like a 2-3 year period. You got a little bit more from Carter Coughlin. He's probably closer to that. What he can offer you, maybe he'll get more, but we can talk, and we haven't talked about it. We'll probably finish off the show with some of the guys we passed on at all these picks, and that would probably be my only complaint here. But solid pick here. Somebody I probably would have thought you could wait for as a UDFA, but I definitely see the vision here. So what do you have?
I mean, this is like end of the draft in terms of your picks. This is, you turn to your special teams coordinator and you're like, who do you need on this team? And he says, go get me my guy. Right.
Yep.
My linebacker / special teams star from UCLA. Just go get him for me. And I think that's what this pick is. I think there's a little bit more than, there's more to this player than the Cam Brown types, right? Like you said, I think he's a functional. I actually think he's a good linebacker. Like when you watch him play as middle linebacker, I notice a few things on tape about him. And I see our buddy Rad's in here. Rad is, he knows all about the players in the LA and California area. So I might have to pick his brain about this guy. I'm sure he's familiar with him from his time in LA. But one thing I noticed watching his film was he is absolutely a defensive captain on the field. What I mean, but he looks like he's got the green dot. And I don't know, I don't even know the green dot concept in college, to be honest. But he's out there calling plays. He's calling defensive plays. And something I noticed is post snap, the guy's out there directing traffic. Like he's out there like, you got that guy. You got like post snap, right? So in zone, he's really going to do a good job with calling protections, calling some rules out there in zone coverage. So I think he can handle that duty. Is he our starting linebacker? Of course not. I don't think he's beating out Micah McFadden right away. But I think if he had to step in, he could be a functionally good player. So there's that. Number two, he's a really good tackler. You mentioned that. You see it on film too. He diagnoses plays very quickly. Like in the run game, he finds, like, unlike Andru Phillips, who seems to take a very circuitous route to the ball, this guy takes a direct path to the football. Like he finds a way to wiggle his way to the ball very quickly and get there as quick as possible. He wraps guys up, and he's a very fundamentally sound tackler. And that matters, right? As a linebacker, you want guys who can wrap up, take guys down, end the play. That's it. It doesn't matter like whether they got no yards, loss, if they got 4 yards. You want to be able to rely on your linebacker to stop the play as fast as possible. And he does that very well. He's a tackling machine. So he's pretty decent in short area zone because he's intelligent. He's got very good instincts. He's a very good tackler. Now he doesn't have athleticism. He's not a sideline to sideline guy, right? He's not going to do some of those really athletic things that Bobby Okereke does. But let's say you have an injury to somebody and he has to come in and play. I'm comfortable with this guy playing. I think he's smart. I think he's got good instincts. And I personally like linebackers like this who are good diagnosers of plays, right? And so I like that guy. No, but like as you said, he's a special teams player initially. He's got to earn his way into more reps. But in the sixth round, to get a guy who could be a serviceable to a good backup linebacker and a solid core special teamer, that's good value. Plain and simple. That's good value. I think a lot of people were down on the pick, probably because the players we left on the board. And I understand that. And I felt that way too to some extent. But in terms of roster construction, you do need guys like Darius Muasau on your team. You can get them as UDFAs, I think. I think that's a fair argument. But they got him. So I'm happy we got him. I think he's an upgrade over Cam Brown. And let's not forget, our special teams have been dog shit for a long time. I'm not going to complain if we add impact smart players to our special teams that work well with the new coach. Absolutely not going to complain about that.
Yep. No, I agree with you. So, overall, I thought it was a good pick. I do think a couple things I want to talk about before we close this thing out. I have a few comps I want to run by you. That's more of a fun one. And then I also kind of want to talk about some of the players we passed on to take these guys. But overall, I think I was not upset with at least the value of any of these picks. I didn't think they reached on anybody here. I thought that every one of these picks made sense, even if I didn't necessarily agree with them as much. Obviously I had my issues in the first round where I was hoping to quarterback, and I had my issues where I was not as high in Andru Phillips. But overall, there's nothing that really upset me that much as far as the philosophy or anything like that with the picks themselves. What are some of your final thoughts there?
No, I don't have a major philosophical issue with the picks themselves. I mean, I think the big picture here was, I think going into the draft, obviously the main thing was we wanted to, and I'm sorry, I'm completely distracted by trying to pay attention to the end of this Knicks game, as is everybody else.
You're good.
I'm just watching it on Gamecast, and the Knicks are driving me crazy. I don't want to talk about it, but let's just see how it ends. Going in, we wanted a quarterback. They didn't get a quarterback. They made a decision not to get a quarterback, and I think there's something to be said about the fact that the Giants have gone 3 straight years under Joe Shane and not drafted a single quarterback. I think that's kind of unheard of for a new regime. Number two, if they didn't go quarterback, I think you and I both wanted them to go BPA, right? They went BPA and took the blue chip player, which I agreed with. Like, if you're not going to take quarterback, I would rather Malik Nabers than anything else at that point. So they did a good job there. But I really would have liked to have seen Joe Shane work the board at that point, trade down a few times, take advantage of a good class in the top 120, get a few extra shots at this, get a few extra swings. And what really bothers me about this class, man, is that we didn't walk away with a single interior defensive lineman in a very strong interior defensive lineman class, especially with pass rushers, especially going into a defense where you're going to rely on 4 guys to get there. And there's a gaping hole on our defensive line. Even though the other 3 guys look outstanding, there's a gaping hole on our defensive line right now.
You got to make your strength a strength.
Yeah, and we didn't get an offensive lineman either, which is weird because it's a really strong offensive line class too. And we always talk about the offensive line. It was just not there. They didn't take it. They just did not take it. So I don't know, man. Like it's bothersome to me that that's how it played out. It played out the way it played out, but. At the end of the day, Joe Shane has asked for patience. I'm not giving it to him. I'm not asking for him to be fired, but I'm expecting him to turn the decisions he has made into a better product on the field, a winning product on the field. No, I'm not. I should be expecting a team that can win the division after 3 years. Let's be real. When you turn over the roster the way you have with the resources you used, you should expect a team to be able to win a division.
That's what most fans were saying. And I know a lot of fans are giving them the pass, but I know for a fact I talked to many of the fans who said throughout the first year, second year is what we're gonna start to see some growth in there. So third year, we're focused on 2024. That's the year we're waiting for. That's the year we're focused on. That's what everyone was saying, and here we are.
Exactly. So, bottom line, I think the Giants, if you just look at it from the vacuum silo of this game, is driving me insane. It's a 1:11. Well, I don't want to say anything. 30. There's 35 seconds left. But bottom line to me is, if you look at the vacuum of did the Giants get good players, they absolutely got good players. They got 6 good football players, in my opinion. If you look at it from the forest from the trees view of did they accomplish their programmatic goals as an organization for where they should be relative to the field, I don't know if I have a clean answer for that one. I'm a little concerned that we might have actually lost ground on
Hmm.
this weekend
Yeah,
versus the Philadelphia Eagles,
really
the
good draft.
Washington Commanders,
Good draft.
and possibly even the Dallas Cowboys. Although I
Solid.
think
Yeah.
they were solid. So I think you can make an argument that the Giants had the weakest draft class of the 4, relative to the field. You can make an argument that they were
Yeah.
there. They certainly weren't the
Cowboys
strong.
are
They
the
weren't.
closest.
Yeah, the Cowboys are close, and we had a lot of ground to make up. So bottom line is, your previous draft picks have to start making it work, right? The guys you took the last couple of years, the guys you invested in, they have to start making it work, and it all has to come together. But that's kind of what I'm going to leave this at. Do you have any other closing thoughts on this?
As far as that, I'm good. Two things I just want to run through real quick for you is, just some of the players that, we were kind of like upset weren't there. I'll just go through it. Like second round, we talked, I think Tyler Nubin for the most part was a BPA, but you alluded to it. Mason Smith was the next pick, the Jaguars. I would have thought that was a little bit of a reach. That was a very Trent Baalke pick there, going with the big athletic upside guy, but I would have trusted Andre Patterson with them, but I'm not mad we didn't do that. But then the pick after that, Chris Jenkins to the Bengals, and the pick after that, Mikey Sanders still to the Commanders. So, both players we were very high on. I'm fine with the pick that they made, but we're gonna talk some picks later here, and it's tough that we're gonna keep bringing up defensive tackles that we passed on probably the next few picks we talk about here. But you have anything to add what you're feeling as far as passing on those
Yeah,
guys?
I think we're going to regret those decisions that we passed on guys who could have had a big impact. I think you have to think about pathways to victory and pathways to success and winning in the upcoming season. When you're going into your third year, I do think you have to kind of you have to find a defensive lineman to really finish off that defensive line and get a pass rush going. And I feel like that one decision to not take a pass rushing D lineman when so many were there to be taken round after round is one that's going to haunt these guys.
Yeah.
I'm afraid that's the
And,
case.
and it's not like we'll talk about like this next third round. I think offensive line is really what they missed, but we've seen a lot of decent interior offensive line drafts come through the last few years. It's been bad on the interior defensive line the last few years, like really bad. And this year was a genuinely good year that they could have capitalized that. The fourth round, there was a guy I really liked sitting there, but sitting in the third round here, we went Andru Phillips. Not going to be very hard for us to prefer guys there, but guys that pop out here, I see Cooper Beebe. I know we weren't super high on, but I wouldn't have been mad if we went that route. Braylon Trice, a guy we were really high on, more of an edge than he's not really an interior guy, but still would have helped that. And then the big one to me, Christian Haynes going to Seattle, 81. Christian Haynes he would have been a BPA argument in the second round for us. I think he was our BPA from what we were speaking earlier. So Christian Haynes, that was a guy I was praying. I know a lot of Giants fans were praying that we took there, and I do think we'll regret not taking Christian Haynes. I think he could have been a piece on this offensive line for a long time.
I agree. All right. I know with that, let's close this out. We appreciate you guys being here. I know the Knicks game going on, coming down to a really close finish here. Those of you who came, thank you so much. Thank you guys for always being here, supporting us. That closes out our first season, honestly,
Yep.
of He's a Giant. We are done for a while. We'll come back. We'll have more content. I think we're gonna have to regroup. I'm not, but we're gonna start analyzing these players a little bit more, looking at the roster in detail. But what we're really gonna be looking at going forward, guys, is getting ready for summer scouting. And I'm gonna lose my shit. But this is how committed I am to you as my pod partner. I just want you to know that I started watching the Knicks when Bernard King was still on them. That's how old I am. Anyway, so we're going to get into summer scouting. We're definitely going to take a different approach to scouting. We've learned a lot along the way, and we're going to try to get better at this for you guys. But if you have ideas,
Yep.
let us know. With that, our usual under 2 hour mark. We're getting better at this. Short episode. Follow us at He's a Giant Pod. Follow me at Queens_guy. Follow Monty at Monte Cristo, spelled at MONTECRI5TO. Thank you. We love you guys. We'll see you next week. Go Giants.
Go Giants.